Welcome to The Making of a Performance, a series of videos that follows Gary Diaz as he takes musical works from composition right through to performance. I'm John Fitzpatrick, and Gary's here on my left. And Gary is a classical guitarist, a composer, a teacher of music, and very definitely a lifelong student of great music. Gary, instead of basing this project on a completely original composition, you've chosen as a starting point one of the iconic works in the guitar repertoire. Tell us about that.
Well, I've always been fond of the Concierto de Aranjuez by Joaquin Rodrigo. And the probability of me as a guitarist getting a chance to perform it is trying to cross an ocean, because it's limited in the sense that you need an orchestra to accompany the guitarist, and there's that fiscal, the financial burden of putting an orchestra together, or being sponsored to get a chance to, make this endeavor a reality. So I decided to scale down and increase the possibility of me getting a chance to perform this work. So I choose to do a transcription for guitar and the small aggregate of string quartet. And to be a little exotic, I also did a transcription for guitar and pan quartet. I am from Trinidad, the land of the steel band. So that's my reason for writing a score that includes a pan quartet, steel pan quartet. Later on, I want to do, for a little larger ensemble of pans, and I'll do an octet.
There we go. It's a lot quieter. I wanted to emphasize that this is a rigorous transcription of the work, because many people have lifted the themes from the work or interpreted it loosely in various ways.
Right.
But you're working through it rigorously, note by note. Maybe you could tell us a little about that process.
Well, I want to be true to the work itself and to the composer, and I want this to be a genuine transcription. Instead of just calling on the second movement, which most people would do because it's such a easy movement to fall in love with. I'm doing the three movements. The first movement is sort of like a build-up to the second one, and the third movement appropriately closes off the whole emotion of the entire composition. Rodrigo, being a Spaniard, he uses a lot of the traditional rhythms of Spain in the first movement and also in the third movement. The second movement is very romantic, with its wonderful, evocative theme. And this being a three movement work, it reminds me of another composition Rodrigo did, 3 Spanish pieces. And in that work, it's a 3 movement work, and you have the Spanish theme at the beginning, the fandango, and Rodrigo chooses to refer to the Baroque period, and he uses a passacaglia. So he replaces the romantic adagio with a passacaglia in that particular 3 Spanish pieces, and he closes it off with a zapateado, which is a traditional Spanish dance. In the concerto, he closes it off, and although he doesn't give it a title, you can feel the emotion and the rhythm of the Spanish dance in the third movement. So I want this to be truly a good transcription, and one that acclaimed guitarists can probably choose to perform in the small setting that I choose to work with. Because as I said, to put together an orchestra to perform this work is costly, time consuming, and you have to get a large aggregate. To work with a string quartet, it's at your fingertips, and I think a lot of guitarists is going to seize the opportunity at a chance of performing a great work, readily available, with a small medium, and doing it for the beauty of the pan. A relative unknown instrument is going to just entice, this exotic love for the piece, conjuring up all the emotion and everything which Rodrigo already laid the foundation for. So I think this is going to be a worthwhile project on my behalf.
Gary, you've now completed the transcription of the first movement for both the solo guitar and string quartet and the solo guitar and pan quartet.
Yes.
Which took you longer to do?
Well, they took about the same time. And the whole thing, it took me like a year and a half. But that was not all I was working on. I had some other compositions and work that I was doing in between. So I sort of like work on these, balance. So I completed everything at once. So the whole pot of maybe 4 or 5 compositions, things that I was doing, took about a year and a half. And these two were included in that pot. The arrangement for string quartet and guitar, I sort of fussed over. And, it took a lot more time than with the pan. What I did with the pan, I used the high pan for the first violin, the alto for the second violin, and the tenor for the viola, and the bass for the the cello part. And the only difficulty that I encountered working with the writing for the pan quartet is how I would go about it. So I decided to use the same system with soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, SATB, for the 4 pans. And the soprano part, the first violin part, I use for the high pan, and the second violin part, the alto, I use for the pan that's going to play the alto part, and the viola part I use for the pan that was going to play the tenor part, and the cello I use, for the bass pan, the lowest voice. But to make it sort of like unique, in writing for the first and second violin, you use the treble clef. But in writing for the first and second pan, in soprano alto, I use the treble for the soprano, and I use the alto for the alto pan. Whereas the alto part, the part that's playing the alto voice in the string quartet is the second violin. The viola, which plays the tenor voice, the third voice, you use the alto clef. So when I got down to write the tenor part, which is the third voice on the pan quartet, I use the tenor clef. So there I had to be careful in writing the viola part, which is in the alto clef, transcribing it for the third voice, the tenor voice. And I say tenor because in traditional pan, the tenor pan is usually the highest, but here I use the tenor voice. So I'm using the tenor clef for the tenor voice in the pan quartet.